Welcome to our next discipleship class. So, today we have a very serious topic that we're going to discuss, not only because it's biblical, but also because it is related to all human beings, and that is the matter of the unborn. So, we're going to talk about abortion today. I think it needs to be understood, certainly at this point in time. We are waiting in the United States for the Supreme Court to come down with a decision regarding Roe versus Wade. And I think what a lot of people don't understand is that that's really not going to change much if they come down against Roe versus Wade at this point. It should not have been legislated the way it was in the past, but we're here at this point, and the states actually should be the ones making the decision on this issue, not the federal government. So I think we just need to step through this issue so that we understand from a different perspective, because this is certainly a matter of life and death for the unborn. And as an introduction, this is the number one moral problem in the United States of America. We have a lot of problems, but this is really the main one. It has killed more human beings between 2000 and 2010 than Hitler killed in the whole Holocaust. The overall average since 1973 is over 1 million people, human beings, a year. It's staggering when you look at it like that, and it kills more human lives in 2 days than we lost in soldiers during the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. So the numbers almost are difficult to imagine, but we need to realize that abortion is a matter of life and death, especially for these vulnerable babies. The place that should be the safest for them, inside a mother's womb, has become the most dangerous place for them to be. So the main point, whatever is against common sense, logic, science, the U.S. Constitution and the Bible is wrong. Abortion is against common sense, logic, science, the U.S. Constitution, and the Bible. Therefore, abortion is wrong. So that would be how we are setting this up. Now, these are the issues that we're going to walk through regarding abortion as an outline. We will look at a common sense approach to it, a logical approach, a scientific approach, a legal approach, because these are all what we deal with in society, and certainly from a Christian perspective, and even from the perspective of Judaism, a biblical approach should be what we adhere to. Now, going forward, the common sense approach, right? It was Confucius that said, one picture is worth 1,000 words. So as we look at the picture, I guess the question is, are these human feet? And even though they're very, very tiny, yes, they are. I mean, that's the obvious answer. And that is the picture of a little human hand. So this is obviously common sense that what we're dealing with here is just tiny human beings. So this is a little baby boy, right? I mean, if I ask you the question, you could certainly answer that. There's no mystery. And was he human before birth? Yes, he was. And we'll talk about that. Does it matter what color he was? Does that make a difference? No, shouldn't. Color doesn't matter. Do you have to be wanted to be human? Or should you be wanted since you are human is the real question. But being wanted does not make you human. Being unwanted does not make you not human. And I think we need to realize that as we look at this from a common sense approach. Does age make a difference? It doesn't really matter how old somebody is. They are still human, no matter their age. And the size, that also doesn't make a difference, because there are premature babies that are born. They are obviously human. They're babies, and We do a lot to try to bring them to the place where they can survive. So this is the common sense viewpoint, and hopefully this is making sense. Does the place make a difference as to whether they are human? No, of course not. It doesn't matter whether they're inside or outside of the womb. They are human, and we all know that. So let's look inside the womb. Is this the picture of this little baby? Obviously, is he human? Yes, he is. Of course he is. How about this one? I mean, they're obviously, just because they're in the womb does not make them non-human. What if she's smaller? Does that mean she's not human? No. And does the method of eating make a difference? I mean, if you do not eat normally, there are some people that obviously they've had some kind of problem eating in the normal way, and they have to be fed through other means. Does that make them less human? No, not at all. So it doesn't obviously do that with a baby in the womb. And what if they are younger? That doesn't make them less human, or even younger still. It doesn't make them less human. What if their shape is a little bit different as they're developing? Does that make them less human? No, because they're growing. It only takes time for them to get larger. What if they are this tiny? Does that mean that they're not human? No, they're still human inside the mother's womb. And what about their location? Their location does not remove the fact that they are human beings, just little ones. How about the size? And what about if you look right side up? Obviously, you're looking at the development of a baby at this point. So size doesn't make a person less or more human. This is a picture of Willie Shoemaker compared to Wilt Chamberlain. One's a jockey, one was a professional basketball player. Is Willie human because he's smaller? Of course he is. How about age? Does that change it? No, that doesn't change it. Color doesn't change it. Location doesn't change it. And how about not having consciousness? Does that change it? No, of course not, because you could have somebody that was in a coma or did not have consciousness. That does not remove the fact that they are human beings. They're still human beings. I think a lot of times we look at this upside down and don't just look at it straightforward for what it is. Some of the arguments have been very silly and they don't make any sense, but I think we need to really take a step back and look at this from a reasonable perspective. This is, we have over 50 million dead babies since they began in 1973, and that's over 4,000 babies killed a day. So it doesn't matter what their size is, doesn't matter what their location is. A child is still a human being, whether they're inside or outside of the womb. It doesn't matter. And should we keep killing unborn babies? No, there's no reason for it. As a matter of fact, there's adoption agencies looking for babies. There are babies that are stolen and sold on the black market because people want babies. Why we would just continue to kill them makes no sense at all. And for heaven's sakes, no, we shouldn't keep killing babies. Now, for people that have had abortions, there is forgiveness. Obviously, Jesus Christ came to pay for our sins. There are people that have committed all kinds of sins. The severity or the type of sin is not the issue. If you've committed sin, Jesus Christ has paid for it. We just need to go to him and ask for forgiveness and enter into a relationship with him. So he's not condemning people. He took the condemnation for us on the cross. So I think that's important because a lot of times, unfortunately, a lot of ladies make decisions about abortion and they're misinformed and they end up in a place of condemnation. And that's not a reason to deny the fact of what actually happened, because once the forgiveness is there and experienced through Christ, then the guilt and the shame is taken by him. And look, we've all done things that we are not proud of, that we would like to have a redo on, but we can't. But that's okay, because Jesus has paid for all of that. He suffered for all those sins. And it's a shame that there are so many people that are suffering for their sins even right now because they won't go to him. He said, Father, forgive them. They do not know what they do. And I think 9 times out of 10, a lot of young girls that are having abortions, they do not know what they're doing. They're told one thing. They're told that it's not a human being. They're told something other than the truth of what it is scientifically as well as everything else. And look, God is ready to forgive you for that. All you have to do is ask him. So let's look at the logical approach. Like it says in Isaiah, God says, come now, let us reason together. And I think that that is a way for us to reason together to look at it. So if we look at it like this, right? An unborn pig is a pig, right? An unborn cow is a cow. An unborn human is obviously, it is still a human. And by law, we protect the life of an eagle's eggs and all kinds of animals today. Humans are certainly more valuable than eagle eggs or other animals, and therefore, by law, we should also protect the life of unborn humans. There is a lot of money put into a lot of protection for different animals that are mistreated and everything, and we have a tendency to just bypass babies as though abortion should be just this accepted murdering of children, but we should not let other animals receive harsh treatment. And I think we're a little bit upside down in that. Until we solve this abortion issue with human beings, any lesser life than that, when we come to animals or below that, needs to take second place. It should not be prioritized above a human life. So in this logical approach, the Supreme Court ruled that corporations are persons protected by the Constitution. That was in 1886. Unborn babies are more valuable than corporations. Therefore, the Supreme Court should also protect the life of unborn what? Humans. Now, like I said, will they? I don't know. Certainly, it will help if the Supreme Court rules against Roe versus Wade, which they have not come out with. We're waiting any day for that result at this point, at least at the point that I'm making this recording. So we'll see what happens with that. But it'll be very disappointing and tragic if we remain in the same direction that we're going. So location, size, feeding method does not change one's status as a human. The only difference between babies before and after birth is location, size, and feeding method, right? Therefore, both before and after they are born, babies are what? They're human. I mean, this is really common sense, and a grade school child can understand this, right? So it is morally wrong to intentionally kill innocent human beings. An unborn baby is an innocent human being. Therefore, it's morally wrong to kill an unborn human being. Pretty straightforward. So the courts have accepted killing human beings for certain reasons before birth. But the same reasons also justify killing human beings after birth. We call that infanticide and euthanasia, right? So infanticide would be killing children after they're born. Euthanasia would be killing an older adult, at the end of their life, because either they or somebody else doesn't want them to live, or they somehow have lost their value. Now, right now, Colorado, Maryland, and they're trying to decide in California whether they continue to commit, if they can commit infanticide. They do in Colorado and Maryland. California will remain to be seen. But, therefore, the reasons used to justify abortion also justify infanticide and euthanasia. So um, if you can kill a baby inside the womb, then bringing it outside should not make a difference. That is the logical conclusion of these infanticide laws, which they are murder and insane, but that is where this goes. And the same thing with euthanasia, that they will kill an older person for the same reason. They can come to the same conclusion that they may be unwanted, or you go through your list of reasons, and then they will end their life too. So abortion ends up with infanticide and eventually euthanasia, right? So you get the same patient, the same arguments, and the same results for each of them. There are many good arguments for abortion. Unfortunately, they are also good arguments for infanticide and euthanasia, said Dr. Paul Ramsey. And Joseph Flesher said abortion is prenatal euthanasia, and euthanasia is postnatal abortion. I think he got that one right, because that's all it really is. We can talk about all the various reasons and everything else, but taking somebody's life is still murder, and especially taking an innocent life. These babies have not done anything wrong, so they shouldn't be killed. And older people, that just because they are older and their quality of life has gone down does not mean that they have done anything wrong to have their life ended. So what are the arguments, right? Why people have abortions? They say, well, they may have to live in poverty. Living in poverty is certainly a better option, especially when somebody can grow out of poverty. They may be handicapped. Listen, I know a lot of handicapped people. They are leading very productive lives. As Christians, they have great relationships with the Lord, and they have been used greatly by God. So how can that be a reason? The world is overcrowded. Look, the world is going to be overcrowded no matter what you do. And there are ways to resolve the crowded situation. We don't want to take one bad decision of why the world is overcrowded the way it is, or how it's concentrated in certain areas, and solve it with another bad decision of just killing people. They might be abused. Anybody might be abused, so we should kill them. Maybe we should focus on the abuser, right? They will be a burden. Well, again, there are many children that would be adopted if they had the option by allowing them to survive. And so they wouldn't be a burden to the parent that necessarily bears them. They're not wanted. Well, not being wanted is not a reason to commit murder. All these apply to children as well as adults in the same condition. Shall we kill them along with the unborn? Well, you'd say, well, no, that's ridiculous. Should we kill an adult just because they're living in poverty, or because they're handicapped, or because they live in overcrowded conditions, or they might have been abused, or there's a potential for abuse, that there'll be a burden on somebody, so let's just kill them, or that they may not be wanted? We'd say, well, that's absurd. Well, it's also absurd to consider it for the unborn. So today, you have no unwanted baby. Tomorrow, it'll turn into no unwanted parent. And that's where the euthanasia comes in, because it's the same logical conclusion. It goes to the same place. So today, it's keep abortion legal. Tomorrow, it's kill the older parents because they're not productive. They're a burden on society. Come up with any reason you want. Their quality of life has gone down. That's not a reason. And how many of you remember Dr. Death, Jack Kevorkian, who was committing euthanasia and then, finally went to trial about it? Let's look at the scientific approach. Everybody wants to talk about science today. Well, let's consider the scientific approach. Is it a scientific fact that the new human life begins at conception? Because, number one, 100% of all genetic characteristics are present at conception. They do not gain any more genetic characteristics beyond conception. They are just allowed time to grow. Nothing new genetically is ever added at a later point. The sex of the individual is determined here. Regardless of some people struggle with, what they are sexually, from a binary standpoint, the sex of the baby is determined at conception. Implantation, which is 1 week later, when you do the artificial implantation to get a woman pregnant, that is still only nesting there, but it still has all the genetic information. Difference from an adult are circumstantial, not essential. In other words, size, shape, age, place. They're just circumstantial differences. They are not essential to the nature of their being or their genetic characteristics. That's the science. So this Nobel-winning scientist said this: to accept the fact that after fertilization has taken place, a new human has come into being is no longer a matter of taste or opinion. The human nature of the human being from conception to old age is not a metaphysical contention. It is plain experimental evidence. So this Nobel Prize winner made this obvious statement that we know is true, but sometimes you need to hear it from somebody that has had the acceptance of their peers, right? Other noted scientists testify at the U.S. Senate Judiciary Committee in 1981. Dr. Matthew Roth, he said, in biology and in medicine, it is an accepted fact that the life of any individual organism reproducing by sexual reproduction begins at conception or fertilization. Dr. Jaime Gordon said, but we now can say unequivocally that the question of when life begins is no longer a question for theological or philosophical debate. It is an established scientific fact that all life, including human life, begins at the moment of conception. So here's a note to those. It is not a potential human, but a human with great potential. A lot of times the argument is, well, inside the womb, they're just a potential human. No, they're already human. They have everything they need genetically. They just have the potential to become greater than they are, but they are still human. Likewise, an acorn is not a potential oak tree. It's an actual tiny oak tree with great potential for growth. Look, once conception takes place, it's just a matter of time and growth. So size should not matter. And the development of certain physical characteristics, again, should not matter because all that information is already coded in. It just needs time to grow, just like an acorn does grow into an oak tree. That is science, plain and simple. How about the legal approach? We talk a lot about that. Human life is an unalienable God-given right under our Constitution. Government should not take away God-given human rights before or after birth, right? We all should be protected by the Constitution in this country. Therefore, government should not take away the God-given right of life by abortion. So, in the U.S. in 1776, the Declaration of Independence, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Everybody has the right to life. People do not have the right to just remove it at will based on their own reasons. On the Jefferson Memorial, it says, God who gave us life gave us liberty. Can the liberties of a nation be secure when we have removed a conviction that these liberties are the gift of God? So it's the obvious answer to really a rhetorical question. So do we know the amendments? The Fifth Amendment says no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. These babies get no due process. They are just, they have their life removed while they're in the womb, while they should be protected by their mothers. Nor shall any state in the 14th Amendment deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law. So that's actually from federal law and to state law, that nobody should be deprived of life. Now, what that actually means is that if states are doing their job, then abortion should not be allowed even at a state level. So even though the Supreme Court currently is going to possibly decide against Roe versus Wade, there still needs to be a decision made at the state level, because even states should not be committing murder on unborn children. That's against the 14th Amendment. So the question is, do we actually know what the Constitution and the amendments and the articles all teach? Do we even know that? Did life include the unborn? I guess we could ask that question. Our laws are based on English common law, which opposed abortions. That's where we got them. Nature's law in the Declaration of Independence comes from the natural law tradition that condemned abortions. So nature's law obviously is telling us, based on the English common law definitions, that we are given life by our Creator, and other people do not have the right to take that away. During that time, the unborn was defined as a child in the womb and a child as a very young person. So each of these definitions fall into the place where these are children inside the womb. The Common Council of New York passed a law in 1716 forbidding midwives to perform abortion. So interesting that it goes back that far. Maybe New York needs to look into their Common Council from years ago instead of doing what they're doing today. So I think it's important that we look at some objections, because certainly people have them and we want to be able to answer them. The first objection is a mother should have control over her own body. So the response, the fetus is not part of her body because, and these are the reasons. Number one, the mother is female and half the babies are not. That is certainly if it doesn't matter whether it's still a female, but if it's a little boy, it's certainly not the mother's body. The baby has its own fingerprint and DNA. In other words, this is proving it's actually not part of the mother's body. An unborn baby is no more part of the womb than one conceived in a test tube is part of the tube. They may be housed there, but they are not part of the woman's body. A black woman who has a baby from two white donors will have a white baby and vice versa. So, you need to realize that the temporary housing that is within the woman's belly for the 9 months, that does not make it part of the woman's body. It has its own individual characteristics. It is a separate person that is just housed there for protection and growth during that time. Objection 2, is not an abortion justified in the case of rape? We hear this all the time. Response, not so. Why punish the innocent baby for the rape? I mean, that seems kind of crazy, right? The guilty rapist should be punished. Why are we punishing the baby? Less than 1% of conceptions occur from rape, so half of the babies are wanted. So now you get less than 1% from rape, and then half of them are wanted. So now you're getting into this minuscule number, and you never make a law for 100% of the people when, it's this small, less than 1% that need to be dealt with in that way. Others are waiting to adopt these babies, right? People can put them up for adoption. They can certainly, these ladies can keep them if they want, but even if abortion were granted for rape, it would not justify the other 99% of abortions. So even if you said, okay, so in the case of rape, though that still would be wrong, because the baby can be given up for adoption, 99% of the leftover abortions have nothing to do with the rape issue. Should the raped mother of many famous and successful people have been aborted? So, in other words, there's plenty of people who have grown up to be successful, some famous, and lived productive lives, through rape, and because the mother did not abort the baby. And I think you should ask them, especially the ones that were not aborted, though their mother was raped. Question 3, is abortion justifiable to save the mother's life? Response, it is not really an abortion. It's a medical procedure to save the mother that leads to the baby's death. In other words, you're not committing an abortion when you're trying to save the mother's life. You're actually having a medical procedure. The baby will die anyways, and in this case, either two die, the baby and the mother, or just the baby, if that's the situation. Saving one life is certainly better than no lives. It is justifiable by the ethical law of double effect. And then finally, it is justifiable on the grounds of self-defense. We see that even in the Bible in Exodus 22. Question 4. If abortion is murder, why not give the mother capital punishment? In other words, if that's really what abortion is. Well, here's the response. This shows no concern for the mother, who is the second victim of abortion, if you were to execute capital punishment on her. Secondly, there should be laws to punish the abortionists, not the mother, because the mother may be coerced or convinced that that's the right thing to do, but it's other people that are really even more guilty than the convinced mother. They shouldn't be convicted until it's proven that A, the baby was alive, and B, abortion killed it. That's when punishment should happen, because, look, there are times that a baby is certainly delivered dead because they did not survive in the womb, but we should not be delivering them, in a sense, aborting them from a womb when they are alive, and then the abortion ends up killing it. Even so, it should not be a murder charge, since there's no malicious intent against the baby. So I think we need to understand what these issues are. Question 5, an embryo is human, so is it not really a person? Why can't we kill it? So if an embryo is human, so it's not really a person. So an embryo is human. Easy for me to say. So it's not really a person. Why can't we kill it? So the response is, and the idea behind the question is, look, it's just an embryo. It's not a human. It's not really a person. Why can't we just dispose of it? This is a significant admission, since we have a duty to protect human life, and the embryo is human. The same decision was used by the Nazis and in the Dred Scott decision in 1857. So, again, we don't want to go back in time and start redoing things that we realize were awful, awful tragedies in basically committing murder. This is an arbitrary and contrived distinction, in other words, between human and embryo. All individual human beings are persons, and embryos are individual human beings. They're not, you don't have an embryo and it'll grow into a person. It is a person. It's a human being. There's no essential difference, only functional ones. In other words, adults without these functions could be killed also. If you say, well, I mean, an embryo can't do this, this, and that, but sometimes you have adults that can't, they may not be able to feed themselves, they may not be able to function normally because of some defect that they have. Well, we don't just kill them. It doesn't remove their humanness. It confuses personhood and personality, which develops later. Personality develops over time. personhood is at the point of conception, because you have everything that is there in the DNA information at conception that just needs time to grow. And look, let's face it, I know some people that don't have much in regards to personality, and they've been born for quite some time, but it's not a reason to kill them. It is legally irrelevant, since even corporations are considered persons protected by the Constitution, and we can't protect babies. I mean, what have we come to as a society that we are so insanely driven to just murder children? This is insanity and craziness on a level that I've never seen. Question 6, what if we are not sure that an embryo is human? Response, if you're not sure, then don't shoot, okay? We do this all the time. If it has a bright orange coat, a hat, and a rifle, it's probably not a deer. Don't kill it. So, you're hunting in the woods. If you're going to take an action that's going to cause the death of someone or something, you better know what you're going to be killing before you actually kill it. You always want to err on the side of caution. If it comes from a human, looks like a human, grow up to be an adult human, then keep it. It's probably a tiny human. I mean, if it looks like a duck, right? So, I mean, these are just so obvious. Question 7, doesn't a woman have a right to privacy? Yes, is the response. But the baby inside her has the right to life, which is greater than the right to privacy. So if it comes between protecting life and protecting privacy, obviously protecting life has the priority over privacy every time. Privacy rights are limited. For example, killing in private does not make it right. And that's really what we're talking about here. Question 8, doesn't a woman have the right to choose? I mean, this is the big slogan. Response, to choose what? To kill an innocent baby? No, that's not a right to choose. To destroy a defenseless child? No. Those are not a right to choose. We do not have the right to commit murder. Question 9, should a woman be forced to carry a baby against her choice? Response, she had a choice when she decided to mate with someone. Conception is the consequence of that choice. The choice was made prior. We don't lay the choice on the innocent child. The choice resides with the adult that made the choice. So we don't then throw it on the baby afterwards and say, well, now this is a second choice. In other words, this is a choice based on consequence. Look, if I decide that I'm going to, rob a bank and say, well, I'm going to just take the money and not hurt anybody, and then in the process of the robbery, I end up killing somebody, should I go to jail for killing somebody? I say, well, that wasn't my intention. Don't I have a right? I mean, we start to get things really confused. So even if a woman didn't have a choice, as in rape, she does now, whether to keep or kill the tiny, vulnerable human being that is in her womb. If someone put a new baby girl on your porch, would you have a right to trash her? I mean, that's really what we're talking about here. You just put it in a little different context and you realize the absurdity. Question 10, why is it wrong to abort when nature does it all the time? Answer, because, number 1, there is an important difference between natural death and homicide. I mean, if somebody dies naturally, there's nothing you can do about it. But that's why we actually hunt down people that are murderers, because we decide that this was a homicide. Somebody did not have the right to take their life. People die of natural causes all the time, but it's wrong for us to kill them. This should be obvious. When did we begin devaluating life? We devalued life, first of all, in 1961, when atheistic religions became protected, because many times their natural outcome is the devaluation of life. There is, under atheism, and I've done videos on this channel, under atheism, And I'm not trying to say that atheists do not want to protect life. I'm not trying to say that atheists are bad people. I don't want to be misunderstood. But in principle, atheism, if there is no God, there is no right to life. There's no right to anything, because God needs to exist in order for human rights to exist, just so that we understand each other on that. In 1962, I remember I was in grade school. Class prayer was banned from school. In 1963, devotional Bible reading was banned. These are things that began to remove the value of life in the minds of society, and made it easier and easier for abortion to come in. Laws protecting the unborn were nullified in 73, and then the Ten Commandments were banned from schools in 1980. And in 87, teaching creation was banned from schools, and the court ruled that schools cannot teach creator, creation, God-given morals. All that was thrown out. So where do we end up? We end up in a place where people have no sense of where moral values come from. They think that they make them up. They think a lot of these people, these kids that are going through school, they think that they were just, they've come from animals, some common ancestor, which tells them that there's no purpose to life, there's no value to life. It's just, whatever you can do to survive, and then you're just going to die and go and become worm food. Look, when I was growing up, I didn't grow up in a Christian home. And even though, I believed that God was there, but I didn't know much about anything. When I went to public school, for 12 years, and they did take prayer and Bible reading out, I remember, it was our first or second grade teacher that said, okay, so we're not going to be teaching creation anymore. And so we're going to be teaching evolution. And so I remember one of the kids asked and said, then does that mean God didn't create the world? And so the teacher's response was, if you want to be scientific, you believe in evolution. And if you want to be religious, you believe God did it. Now, as a little kid, I sat there and I thought, well, how does believing it make it any different? I mean, it can only be one or the other, right? I mean, I even thought that as a kid in grade school. I didn't ask the question. I didn't have enough information. It caused confusion. And by the time I graduated high school, I was still confused, because all we ever learned was evolution, but it did not make sense in the fact that if God was there, then how did evolution work? Because obviously it is really either one or the other. It's not both. And obviously in time, in discovering what the real scientific evidence is, I understand that evolution actually does not have scientific evidence to support it. Now, before, people go ballistic over that statement, I would like to ask you a question. If you are an evolutionist, what evidence do you have? Or what evidence do you believe you have? Or what do you believe is evidence? You really need to ask yourself the question, because if you think that natural selection will bring body plan changes into account, then you don't understand science. And if you think that evolution and mindless changes randomly over time has given us the life forms and the complexity and everything that we know now, especially with the discovery of DNA and the information that's there, you need to really revisit the whole issue, because there's something scientifically that you just are missing. The death of God, and here's where we're going, leads to the death of man. We saw it with Adolf Hitler. He killed 12 million people. We saw it with Joseph Stalin. At a minimum, 18, and many believe more. Mao Zedong, 30 million. These are people that killed their own people, okay? Because when you don't believe in God, when you eliminate God from the program, then man becomes God and life becomes valueless. It is just a means to an end. Meanwhile, back in America, we thought it couldn't happen here, right? Land of the free and home of the brave. But yet we've killed over 47 million babies. At this point, over 50. These estimates were put in when Norman Geisler first did this presentation about 12 years ago. So either way, the point is, too many babies have been murdered. This is an entire generation just in the U.S. What can I do? You say, what can I do? Well, first of all, don't have an abortion, even if it's the most convenient thing to do. That's number one. Number two, if you had one, you ask God for forgiveness, like we talked about earlier. He will forgive you. You enter your relationship with Jesus Christ, start following him, and you'll realize that the forgiveness will remove the guilt and the shame, and you will have a reunite. You will be reunited, easy for me to say, with your child one day in heaven. Encourage others not to have an abortion. That's pretty simple. It's what I'm trying to do now. I'm trying to help people understand that don't really understand the issue. Support pro-life groups and causes because they're trying to do the same. Volunteer for pro-life groups and causes. Hey, look, if you have the time to do that, some people are saying, I don't know what to do with myself. Well, there's something that you can do with yourself right there. Get a pro-life bumper sticker. I have one on the back of my truck that says equal rights for the unborn. One of my friends made it, and so I have that. I actually have it on the back of my computer. I'm since I teach high school kids, I get stickers on my computer like kids do, but that's one of them. Vote for pro-life candidates. Look, I don't want to get into the whole voting issue at this point because we're talking about abortion, but you need to realize that you should be voting for people. If you are a Christian, you should be voting for people, regardless of what their name is or their gender is or anything else. If they have biblical values and their policies are aligning closer to the Bible than the other candidate, that's the one you vote for. Too many times we vote personality instead of policy, and we don't seem to be able to make that distinction. Maybe you can run for a local or state or federal office yourself. Get involved. Maybe God's called you to do that. And pray for those in Congress and in the Supreme Court, especially where this is on the table with them right now. We need to get back to our roots. Like Jefferson said, God who gave us life gave us liberty. Can the liberties of a nation remain secure when we have removed the conviction that these liberties are the gift of God? No, we won't. And that is why we've had so many riots and so much unrest, especially over the past couple of years with just all this craziness by these they're really domestic terrorist groups with Antifa and BLM as they are hurting people. They're destroying people's businesses. People have died in the process of all these riots. And in many of these cities, they've been let go. But the reason that, they've gone through this whole woke thing of taking down statues and, destroying all this stuff from our past is because if you can erase the roots and remove the national identity of a people, you can control their future. But we have a valued past. We don't have a perfect past as a country, but we are the freest nation in the world, or at least we used to be, and there is a basis and foundation to our country that we should not throw away. And as Christians, God has given us the opportunity to be in the best nation in the world. And at this point, do not let somebody else take your national identity away from you. And I'm talking about your American identity and what it means to be an American citizen. and do not let somebody change it into what they want it to be. You want to understand what it is to be an American and what that whole American ideal is, then you go back and you read the documents from the founders that basically sacrificed their own lives in order to provide for us the form of government and the freedom in this country that we have enjoyed over the last couple of hundred years. So, look, that's a whole larger issue, but as Christians, we are to submit to the government, but at the same time, we have an opportunity because of the type of government we have that we can have an influence in the government. I'm not talking about making the government a denomination, making it Christian. We do not want the government involved in religion, but we do want religious people involved in government, and that's the way that the founders set it up, and that's the way that it should be operating. But do not let anybody cut you off from your past and remove your national identity, because people without an identity can be morphed into anything anybody wants them to be. How about a biblical approach? Unborn are called children in the Bible, and there are the references for you. The same word, brephos, is used for a young child as somebody that is unborn. Christ's human life began at conception. The unborn possess sinful natures from conception, right? That's David from Psalm 51. The image of God includes male and female, which begins at conception. The unborn experiences joy like other persons. We remember that John the Baptist did that in his mother Elizabeth's womb, that reference to Luke 1. The personal pronoun he is used of the unborn. They are persons. God knows them personally in the womb, and the life of the unborn is protected with the same punishments for injury or death that adults get. Now, that's in Genesis 9:6, where it talks about committing murder. But interestingly enough, in Exodus 21, under the Mosaic law, it says if men fight and hurt a woman with child, in other words, she's pregnant so that she gives birth prematurely, if any lasting harm follows, then you should give life for life. This is the law of retaliation, lex talionis. So it is. This is where if the baby died, if the baby was prematurely born because of injury to the mother in a fight, then the person that was responsible, as long as there was no harm to the baby, then there was damages that needed to be paid. Okay, but if the baby died, then they killed a human being, right? Somebody made in the image of God, even though they were in the womb. So from a Bible approach, there's no question that God sees from the point of conception that all these children in the womb are human beings. They are persons, and that's why it's life for life at that point. The main point, whatever's against common sense, logic, science, the U.S. Constitution, and the Bible is wrong. Abortion is against common sense, logic, science, the U.S. Constitution, and the Bible. Therefore, abortion is wrong. That's where we started, and that's where we end. So with that, I hope that clarifies some of the issues regarding abortion. I know that it can be a very confusing topic because of how it gets kind of filtered through the media and politics and political statements and slogans and everything else. But the bottom line is babies are human beings. They should be protected. They should be more protected than anybody else, any other human being, because of their vulnerability, their size, their location, and their preciousness. So with that, may God richly bless you as you continue to study His Word.